Welcome back to True Echo, where quiet strength meets unforgettable stories. Today's journey takes us into the life of a boy overlooked and mocked for something he wore every day. But when a four-star general steps in, his entire school learns that silence can carry more power than 1,000 words. This is a story about legacy, dignity, and what happens when history refuses to be ignored. You wouldn't notice him at first. 16-year-old Darnell Brooks wasn't made to stand out, and Jefferson High had a way of swallowing kids like him whole. He blended in with the beige lockers and flickering hallway lights, the cracked tile floors and the dull, daily shuffle of students counting down to 3:15. But every single day, no matter the weather, Darnell wore one thing that made him different: his grandfather's old olive green military jacket. It didn't sparkle. It didn't shine. It looked like something dragged out of a dusty basement. Frayed cuffs. Mismatched buttons. A tear near the wrist he'd stitched up with dental floss when thread ran out. But what stood out most was the patch. Faded, but intact, Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion. And to most of the kids at Jefferson High, that patch was just decoration. Some old thrift store flex. Just another weird thing a quiet kid clung to. But to Darnell, it meant everything. He didn't wear it to look cool. Or tough. Or different. He wore it because it was the only real thing he had of his grandfather. A man he barely remembered, but respected like a myth. A man who served in Vietnam, came home silent, and left behind only a photo and a jacket. Darnell didn't remember his voice. But he remembered that funeral. The folded flag. The way his mother cried like her lungs were being ripped from her chest. Other kids didn't care about any of that. Ricky Mathers, the football captain, sure didn't. "Yo Brooks," he'd shout across the lunchroom, Rambo called. "He wants his jacket back." Laughter followed. Loud. Cruel. Familiar. Mallory Scott would snicker beside him, blonde curls bouncing like something out of a shampoo ad. Tyler Pierce would smirk silently, the kind of smile that didn't use lips, just eyes. And Darnell? He never reacted. But inside, every word chipped away. It wasn't just the words. It was the notes passed behind his back in history class, General Nobody. The time he found his jacket stuffed in a locker room toilet. The lunch tray flipped, by accident. The teachers didn't do much. Most thought he didn't care. That silence meant resilience. But Darnell wasn't numb. He was just disciplined. He'd taught himself to fold the pain down, layer by layer, like his grandfather folded his uniform. Invisible. Controlled. Safe. Still, some nights, he sat in bed tracing the edges of the patch with his thumb, wondering what kind of man his grandfather had been. What he'd endured. What he'd survived. What made him hold on to a jacket until the day he died. And on those nights, Darnell reminded himself, "I wear this because it's mine. Not theirs." But that didn't stop the mocking. Until the day everything changed. The email came on a gray Wednesday morning. It might have gone unnoticed if Ms. Grayson hadn't nudged his desk gently during English class. "Check your inbox, Darnell," she said, her voice low. "You've been selected for something." He blinked. Him. That night, curiosity outweighed his usual dread of school emails. The subject line read, "Leadership and Civics Seminar, Washington, D.C." He almost deleted it. These kinds of things were for the overachievers, the student council kids, not the boy who sat near the back and didn't speak unless called on. But there it was, his name. Darnell Brooks. One of 5 students chosen from Jefferson High. He confronted Ms. Grayson the next morning. "Why me?" She smiled like she'd been waiting for the question. "Because sometimes showing up every day, quietly, is a kind of leadership. You don't always have to raise your hand to be seen." He didn't argue. 2 weeks later, Darnell stood at the front of the school, clutching the jacket tighter than usual as a charter bus idled nearby. He boarded silently, earbuds in, jacket zipped to the collar. Ricky and his crew piled into the back, already cracking jokes. He expected them to say something about the jacket again, but they didn't. Maybe they were too tired. Or maybe they were saving it for later. The drive to Washington, D.C., took hours. The landscape blurred past the window, trees still bare from winter, gray sky refusing to brighten. He rested his cheek against the glass, thumbs circling the patch like always. There was comfort in that motion now, something ritualistic. He didn't know what waited for him at this seminar, but at least he'd brought something real. The building in D.C. was massive, all marble steps and metal detectors. Students from all over the state gathered in clumps, badges clipped to their shirts, laughter echoing in the open-air lobby. Darnell stayed near the edges. A few ROTC kids in pressed uniforms stood nearby, comparing badges. He didn't belong in that circle, and he didn't try. The seminar started slow, a congresswoman giving a speech about civic duty, a mayor rambling about leadership. Darnell listened politely, not fully engaged. The lunch break came and went. Then a name echoed through the speakers that made the auditorium shift. Please welcome General Catherine Albright, United States Army, retired. Darnell sat up straighter. The name tugged something in his memory, but he couldn't place it. She walked in, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a black blazer and boots that clicked with each step. She wasn't flashy. She didn't smile. But she didn't need to. The room leaned in the moment she took the stage. I've briefed presidents, she began, but today I want to talk to you about something quieter. About the kind of leadership that isn't loud. That isn't noticed. Until it has to be. Darnell didn't blink. He didn't move. Her words rang with a weight he hadn't felt before. She spoke of silence. Of courage. Of soldiers who didn't make it home. And the ones who did, but never left the war behind. There's something sacred about the things we carry, she said. Some of it you can touch. Most of it, you can't. His throat tightened. When her speech ended, everyone stood to applaud. But Darnell didn't move. He watched her descend the stairs, slowly, like she didn't belong to any rush. And then, she looked right at him. Stopped. Walked toward him. Straight to him. You wear that often? She asked, nodding at the jacket. He swallowed. Almost every day. She studied the patch like it was a photograph from her past. Charlie Company. 2nd Battalion. Vietnam. He nodded. It was my grandfather's. Her breath caught, not dramatically, just a hitch in her composure. Name? She asked. Leroy Brooks. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her voice dropped. Leroy, she whispered. He was a legend. And just like that, the room shifted. Ricky, sitting 5 rows back, went still. Mallory froze mid-whisper. Even Tyler dropped his pen. General Albright smiled, barely, but it wasn't performative. It was reverent. He saved my commanding officer. Carried him out under fire. We called him Doc, even though he wasn't a medic. He always had something, aspirin, socks, stories. Darnell's world tilted. He'd spent years wondering if anyone remembered Leroy Brooks beyond the 4 walls of his house. Now here stood a 4-star general, talking like she owed her life to him. I'd like to speak at your school, she said suddenly. About Leroy. About what he stood for. Darnell blinked. Would that be okay? He could barely nod. Tell your mother I said thank you, she added. And if she remembers me, tell her I'd like to talk. Then she walked away, just as calmly as she arrived. But Darnell couldn't move. Because everything had changed, in front of everyone. And the jacket? For the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like armor. The bus ride home didn't feel the same. It wasn't louder or wilder, just quieter in a way that felt new. Darnell sat in the same window seat as before, jacket zipped up, patch resting against his heart. But the stares? They'd changed. No longer sneers or sideways glances. Now they carried weight. Curiosity. Maybe even, respect. Even Ricky hadn't said a word. Not one joke. Not one Rambo reference. He'd looked over once, eyebrows raised, as if he were still trying to process what had happened. Darnell didn't return the look. He didn't need to. Something had shifted, and not just inside him. The following morning, Jefferson High buzzed like a stirred hive. Word had spread fast. Darnell could feel it before he even stepped through the front doors. Eyes followed him now, openly. But this time, they weren't filled with mockery. They were filled with questions. In homeroom, Ms. Grayson pulled him aside. She called, she said, and he didn't even have to ask who. General Albright, he whispered. She nodded. She spoke to Principal Hernandez too. She's coming to Jefferson next week. Wants to speak to the entire school. About your grandfather. Darnell stared at her, blinking. She asked for your mother to be there. Told us to clear the gym. Press might even show up. This isn't just a visit, Darnell. This is something else. That afternoon, the official announcement came over the intercom. Next Friday at 10 a.m., we'll be hosting a very special guest, General Catherine Albright, U.S. Army, retired, for a school-wide assembly in our gymnasium. Students, faculty, and families are invited. This is a rare honor for our school. The moment the mic clicked off, the room exploded with whispers. In history class, 2 students looked over their shoulders and actually smiled at him. In the hallway, someone bumped into his shoulder and apologized. Apologized. That had never happened before. But nothing compared to 6th period. He was at his locker when Ricky showed up. Alone. Leaning against the metal door next to him like he always had, only this time, without that smug tilt to his voice. Yo, he said, like nothing had ever happened. Darnell kept placing books in his backpack, not responding. I didn't know your granddad was like, real military, Ricky continued. That's crazy. Darnell glanced sideways. Yeah. He was. Ricky scratched his neck. Look, man. I was just messing before. You know how it is. Darnell zipped his bag and shut the locker slowly. Yeah, he said, voice calm. I know how it is. And he walked away. No fury. No revenge. Just calm. Measured. Let them sit in it. Mallory passed him in the cafeteria later that day. She didn't laugh or nudge her friends. She just watched him go by, her lips pressed tight in something that resembled guilt. Tyler didn't even make eye contact. The story had broken open. And now, for the first time since he'd started wearing that jacket, people were asking questions, the right ones. That evening, Patrice sat across the dinner table still in her scrubs. Darnell told her everything, about the general, about DC, about what was coming. She listened in still silence. Then, without a word, she stood, went to her bedroom, and returned minutes later with a battered metal tin. Inside was a yellowed letter, neatly folded. Typed. Signed in pen, K. Albright, 2nd Light, U.S. Army. I think he kept this all those years, Patrice said softly. She wrote this after the war. Thanked him for carrying her out after an ambush. I forgot all about it. Darnell held it carefully, hands trembling slightly. Thank you for reminding me what it means to come home, the letter read. He looked up at his mother. You think he'd be proud? Patrice reached over and placed her hand on the patch. I know he would. Then she added, almost a whisper. But pride is quiet. It doesn't shout. It shows up in jackets like this. In boys who wear them even when the world doesn't understand why. And in that moment, something inside Darnell broke open, not in pain, but in release. The weight he'd carried wasn't gone. But now he knew it had a name. A story. And soon, the entire school would know it too. The days leading up to the assembly unfolded like a slow drum roll. By Monday, posters had gone up around the school. Special Assembly, honoring the legacy of service. Underneath the bold title, a faded photo of a young General Catherine Albright in uniform stood beside a line of soldiers. No names. No dates. Just presence. Students walked past it without snickering. That alone was surreal. Even teachers looked different, straighter backs, sharper voices, shirts tucked in like they were expecting a surprise inspection. But for Darnell, the biggest shift wasn't in the halls. It was in how people looked at the jacket. Before, it had been a joke. Now, a symbol. Students didn't whisper anymore. Some nodded. A few even muttered, "Cool jacket," with real sincerity, like they were trying to make up for years of silence. Still, Darnell didn't change. He stayed quiet. Grounded. Ms. Grayson checked in every morning. "You holding up?" He always answered the same. "Yeah." But this time, he meant it. That Thursday night, Patrice laid the jacket on the kitchen table. She didn't iron it. She just ran her palms down the fabric, smoothing out the creases gently. "I thought about getting this cleaned once," she said, voice soft. "But I didn't." "Why not?" Darnell asked. "Because he bled in this," she said, fingers pausing near the shoulder seam. "He marched in this. He grieved in this. You don't press out history, baby. You carry it." Darnell didn't say anything. He just nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the patch. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling for hours, jacket folded neatly across the end of his bed. And somewhere in that stillness, he felt something rise inside him, not fear. Not anxiety. But something stronger. Readiness. Friday came. By 7:30 a.m., the gym was a hive of activity. Folding chairs lined up in military precision. A podium stood beneath the American flag, corded microphones clipped and tested. Teachers checked seating charts. Custodians laid mats across the gym floor to protect the polish. By 8:45, parents had started arriving. Darnell walked through it all like a calm in the middle of a spinning storm. His jacket zipped. Shoulders straight. He wasn't trying to look brave anymore. He simply was. At 9:42 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. General Catherine Albright stepped out, same as before. Blazer. Boots. No medals. Just presence. She walked toward the gym without needing to ask for directions. But before entering, she paused. "I'd like to meet his mother first." A teacher led her to Patrice, who stood near the staff entrance, calm and quiet in a navy dress. When their eyes met, something invisible passed between them. "You look just like your father," Albright said. "I can see it in your son." Patrice reached for her hand. "Thank you for remembering him." 10 minutes later, the gym was full. Packed to the rafters. Students, parents, even a few reporters seated in the back with notebooks and cameras. The buzz died the moment Principal Hernandez stepped up to the mic. "Today," he said, clearing his throat, "is not ordinary. Today we welcome someone who served her country in ways most of us can only imagine. But she's here not just for herself. She's here because of one of our own." He turned. "Please welcome General Catherine Albright." Applause rose like a wave, then dropped into absolute silence as she stepped forward. She didn't use notes. Didn't need them. I've commanded battalions, stood beside presidents, and delivered eulogies for men and women braver than I could ever be, she said, voice firm. But I'm not here for that. She looked out at the crowd, every face riveted. I came here for a boy. And a jacket. And a man named Leroy Brooks. Darnell's heart slammed once in his chest. The gym seemed to hold its breath. She told them everything. About Vietnam. About the ambush near Khe Sanh. About the fire, the confusion, the young soldier who ran back through the bullets when no one else would. He carried 3 of us out. Didn't stop. Took a bullet in the shoulder, wrapped it himself. Never told anyone. Just said we were lucky. But it wasn't luck. It was him. She turned toward Darnell. And now his grandson wears that jacket. Every day. Quietly. Without asking for applause. Students glanced sideways. Teachers stiffened. But today, she continued, I asked him to stand. Because sometimes the quietest voice carries the loudest truth. The gym fell still. Darnell Brooks, she said. Would you join me? He stood. Chair scraping the gym floor. All eyes on him. But he didn't falter. Didn't rush. Just walked. Every step steady. Every breath sure. When he reached the stage, she moved aside, not to take the spotlight, but to make room for him in it. He looked out at the sea of faces. Familiar ones. Ones that had laughed at him. Mocked him. Ignored him. And for the first time, he didn't shrink. Darnell stood at the podium, heart pounding but face calm. He could feel every eye in the room locked on him, students, teachers, parents. Ricky, arms folded. Mallory, still. Tyler, blinking fast like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. But Darnell wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He looked down once, then up again. I didn't really know my grandfather, he began, voice soft but clear. He died when I was 5. I have a photo, a folded flag, and this jacket. He paused, fingers brushing the patch. I didn't wear it to stand out. I wore it because it made me feel close to something I didn't fully understand. Something bigger than just me. I thought maybe, if I wore it long enough, I'd figure out who he was. And maybe a little bit of who I am too. No one moved. He glanced around the gym, the scoreboard, the banners, the quiet crowd. People made fun of it. Called me names. Pulled it off my chair. Stuffed it in lockers. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't want to lose what it meant to me. There was a rustle in the audience. Someone sniffled. Ms. Grayson sat near the front, eyes glassy. But now I know, Darnell continued, that what I've been carrying wasn't just a jacket. It was a story. A man. A sacrifice I didn't earn, but that I can honor. He exhaled slowly. This jacket isn't perfect. It's torn. The cuffs are frayed. But it's real. Just like my grandfather was. Just like the people who never made it home. Then he looked directly at General Albright. Thank you. For remembering him. She nodded, her chin barely moving, but her eyes said everything. Darnell stepped back, and the gym erupted. No one had to start it. It just rose, like a wave of thunder rolling across the hardwood floor. Students who'd never spoken to him clapped. Teachers stood. A few of the ROTC students even saluted. For the first time, Darnell didn't just feel seen, he felt understood. When the noise finally died down, General Albright stepped back to the mic. Let this be a reminder, she said. You never know what someone is carrying. So ask. Before you mock. Listen. Before you judge. And remember, the quiet ones. They often carry the loudest truths. She turned toward Darnell. You did good, son. The gym emptied slowly after that. Some students lingered, wanting to say something, unsure how. A few teachers pulled Darnell aside, thanked him. A local reporter asked for a comment, he declined. He didn't need headlines. That wasn't the point. Back in the hallway, Ricky approached. He wasn't alone, but he stepped forward by himself. Hey, he said. What you said, that was real. Darnell nodded. I was a jerk, Ricky added. For a long time. I didn't know who your grandfather was. I didn't know you. But I see it now. Darnell looked him in the eye. Thanks, he said. That was all. Mallory came next. I'm sorry, she said, quiet and sincere. We were wrong. Tyler didn't speak. But he stepped forward, stuck out his hand, and Darnell shook it. Not like friends. Not like equals. But like something had passed between them. A silent, mutual recognition. Later that evening, at home, Patrice sat with Darnell on the porch. She sipped tea while he stared into the dusk. You were incredible today, she said, voice steady. Just like your grandfather. He never talked much, either. But when he did, people listened. Darnell glanced down at the letter from General Albright. She'd handed it to him before leaving, typed on personal stationery, signed in real ink. The strength you carry comes from more than a name. It comes from your willingness to carry it even when no one's watching. If you ever need me, I'm just a phone call away. Catherine Albright, General, retired. He folded it carefully and placed it next to the older letter in the tin. His legacy now had two voices. And both were powerful. The Monday after the assembly felt like stepping into a different school. The walls were still the same faded blue. The vending machine still buzzed too loud in the lunchroom. But the air had changed. So had the eyes that followed Darnell as he walked through the main hall. Not in pity. Not in discomfort. In recognition. Hey, Brooks, someone said as he passed by. That was real what you did. Another kid in gym class nodded, not saying much, but enough to mean everything. No one tried to touch his jacket anymore. No one whispered, General Nobody. The whispers had changed now. They sounded more like, that's him, right? Or, I didn't know his granddad was that guy. But none of that really mattered to Darnell. Because for the first time, the silence surrounding him wasn't isolating. It was respectful. He still sat in his usual spot near the vending machines at lunch. But now, it wasn't empty. Two younger students came over and asked if they could sit. One of them, a freshman with braces and a tremble in his voice, said, My cousin's a Marine. I liked what you said. Made me want to ask him stuff. Darnell nodded. You should. Then the boy pulled something out of his backpack, a simple folded paper. It read. Thanks for wearing that jacket. For all of them. Darnell didn't ask who wrote it. He just folded it and placed it in the inside pocket, over his heart. Later that week, during second period, Ms. Grayson entered the classroom holding a flyer. Darnell, she said, interrupting the lesson, you've been invited to speak at the State Youth Civics panel next month. He blinked. Me? She smiled. General Albright submitted your name personally. The room erupted in a chorus of low, what, and dang, and no way. He didn't react at first, just stared at the paper. It didn't have much on it, just a date, a location, and the words, Voices of Quiet Power. The teacher gave him the day off to think about it. But Darnell already knew. He couldn't go back to hiding. That night, he told Patrice about it while they were cleaning up dinner. She paused at the sink, turned, and leaned against the counter. You gonna do it? She asked. I think I have to, he said. She smiled, not big, just enough. Good. Sometimes the world needs a reminder of what strength looks like when it's not yelling. The following day, something happened in biology class that caught him off guard. Mallory stopped by his desk before the bell rang. She wasn't holding a phone or lip gloss or anything she could use to hide behind. "I heard about the civics panel," she said. He nodded. "That's huge." "Yeah." She hesitated. Then added, "People hear you now. Don't waste that." He didn't promise her anything. He just said, "I won't." And that was enough. 2 weeks later, he stood inside Harrisburg Hall, the same boy who once sat alone near vending machines, now the keynote speaker for a room filled with teachers, politicians, veterans, and students from all across the state. He wore the jacket. Pressed as much as it could be without erasing its history. He didn't write a speech. He didn't need one. When he took the mic, the crowd hushed. "My name is Darnell Brooks," he said. "You don't know me. That's fine. I'm not famous. But I've been carrying a story. And now it's time you heard it." He told them everything, the jokes, the silence, the patch, the day a general saw more in him than anyone ever had. But most of all, he told them about Leroy Brooks. About a man who saved lives and never asked for thanks. A man who left behind a jacket, and a legacy that could no longer be ignored. When he finished, the applause wasn't thunderous, it was sustained. Long-lasting. The kind that felt more like a salute than a standing ovation. Afterward, a state representative shook his hand and said, "You've got leadership written all over you, son." A local newspaper ran a story the next day titled, "The Jacket That Changed a School, and Maybe More." But Darnell didn't care about the attention. He cared that the next time someone wore something with a story stitched into the fabric, people might pause before laughing. Spring came late to Harrisburg that year. The snow melted slowly, like the town itself wasn't quite ready to shed winter's weight. But at Jefferson High, something had already thawed. Not the weather, the atmosphere. The jokes that used to trail Darnell like smoke had vanished. Even the silence that once clung to him like a second skin now felt different. Not cold. Not isolating. Respectful. He still wore the jacket. Still rolled the cuffs just past his wrists. Still traced the patch on the chest when his mind wandered. But now, the weight it carried felt shared. Not just his anymore. One morning in homeroom, the guidance counselor handed Ms. Grayson a stack of mail. She opened one, read it quickly, then turned to Darnell. "Brooks," she said. "You got something." It was a letter. Handwritten. The handwriting was messy, teenage. "My dad served too. But he never talks about it. After your speech, I asked him why. He finally told me about his best friend, someone who didn't make it back. Said he'd never cried in front of anyone until then. I think he needed that. So, thanks. I think I understand him better now." No signature. Just a folded page that smelled faintly like pencil shavings and courage. That afternoon, as he walked home, same streets, same cracked sidewalks, same shortcut through the community garden, kids waved at him. Some younger ones even called out, "Hey, Darnell," like he was someone worth knowing. At home, there was another letter waiting for him. This one typed. Clean. Precise. From the office of General Catherine Albright. Darnell. I've served with soldiers who commanded entire battalions, and still never carried themselves with the kind of integrity I saw in you. If you ever need a reference, a recommendation, or simply someone who remembers, I'm a phone call away. Thank you for honoring your grandfather in the quietest, strongest way possible. Catherine Albright, General, U.S. Army, Ret. He read it 3 times. Folded it carefully. Then tucked it into the same tin that now held the yellowed letter from decades ago and the photo of Leroy Brooks grinning beside his tank. Later that night, Darnell stood in front of the mirror. He wasn't getting ready for anything. He just looked. The jacket still hung loose on his shoulders, like it wasn't quite his, but it was. The patch was slightly faded, threads fraying again. He didn't plan to fix them this time. Some things needed to wear their history. He didn't see a kid pretending to be someone he wasn't anymore. He saw a boy who had become something, not by raising his voice, not by throwing fists, but by enduring. By honoring. That night, he opened his notebook and began to write. The jacket was never about fashion. It was never about standing out. It was about remembering. And sometimes, remembering is enough to change a room. Or a person. Or a school. I don't wear it to look strong. I wear it to stay connected to someone who was. And maybe, just maybe, one day, someone else will wear something of mine. And carry me forward. At True Echo, we tell stories that remind us, strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it walks quietly, wearing an old jacket, carrying history on its shoulders. Darnell Brooks taught us that dignity isn't given, it's worn, lived, and passed on. The quietest person in the room may be carrying the loudest truth. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might be carrying their own invisible legacy. Leave a comment below, tell us about a jacket, a name, or a memory that changed how you saw the world. And if you believe in honoring stories that too often go unheard, subscribe to True Echo, because voices like Darnell's matter.